All right, welcome to an impromptu edition of the Blunt Force Conservative Podcast. As you can see, I have a special guest here. He's been visiting this weekend. My consigliere. Can I call you my consigliere, Chris?
I'm not Italian, so
This is my brother-in-law, Chris Allen. Chris is an attorney, and he is also a judge. Now, what level of the court system are you a judge?
the lowest possible level.
Traffic court?
Yes, traffic court, municipal court, misdemeanors, violations, traffic court. The most serious thing we deal with is probably domestic violence, misdemeanors, and DUIs, things like that.
And excuse me if I cough here and there. I'm just getting over I think a sinus infection or something. I took antibiotics earlier in the week, and it is slowly clearing itself out. The reason I brought Chris on, and Chris is a very knowledgeable legal scholar. He can really hang with me in the constitutional debate. I turn to him when we look at the law and the applications of the law. If you have traveled anywhere in the southeast of Alabama, you will see one of Chris's law school buddies on, is it every billboard or is it most billboards?
He's got a deal, in at least in the state of Alabama with a certain billboard company that if they have any empty billboards, vacant billboards, he automatically gets them.
Yeah, it's Alexander Shannara. Is that how you say
That's right. I
it?
think his Alexander may not be his actual
First name,
given.
surname?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, anyway, so I brought Chris on here. Those of you that tuned in earlier this week, and I appreciate it, when I was on WYEB on Tuesday, I was on the Andrew Gasser show, and we talked a little bit about redistricting. It is a hot topic here in the state of Mississippi. It's a hot topic in the nation. We've got a lot of states that are looking at redistricting. We've got some states that weren't initially looking at redistricting and have since changed their mind. Some of that has been from the pressure from the White House of making some behind the scenes calls. At least that's what I've been told from a reliable source, that Governor Kay Ivey was told, hey, start looking into redistricting or maybe look at losing some federal funds. And that is how politics is played. So I asked Chris to take a look at the decision that sparked all of this debate, and that was the Calais decision out of Louisiana. Now I know I'm more knowledgeable of the constitutional aspects of it, of the fact that the ruling covers everything in the United States. It's not just Louisiana, but it reaffirmed what we already knew from the Constitution, that you couldn't draw district lines for representation based predominantly on race. Chris, is there anything else that you picked up in your study from the Calais decision and how it impacts elections and representation?
Yeah, and no, it's a 90 something page decision, and in all fairness, I've read about 45 pages. It got a little monotonous for me. Um, but yeah, it basically says that under strict scrutiny, which is the highest level of scrutiny for a constitutional question, um, it's not enough uh, for the state that's doing the redistricting to be able to do so strictly on the base of race. Um, yeah, that's pretty much what it says. The court in the past kind of assumed that it could do redistricting on the account of race, but it was never actually answered. That question's never actually been answered until now.
Now you're reading an understanding of the Equal Protection Clause of the U.S. Constitution and the Voting Rights Act. Um, it would seem that those would have already answered the question of how district lines are drawn. I mean, the Constitution is pretty clear. It's based on population. Um, and to draw the lines, to gerrymander those, you can gerrymander, in other words, draw them in unusual angles and stuff to take care of population migration. But that population migration can't be based on, well, a bunch of blacks moved over here, so we need to move the district over there. And that's really what they did in Mississippi, I think, under force of the courts, or at least some lawsuits back in 2022 when they extended Congressman Benny Thompson's districts. I think they had about 4 or 5 more counties. And it was done predominantly based on race. Now, from your understanding of Calais, even though it dealt specifically with the state of Louisiana, was the Supreme Court clear that the Constitution says that lines can't be drawn predominantly on race?
Yeah, it's a federal question. It certainly is.
And do federal questions only apply to the state that's suing, or the state that, or the individuals that are suing that bring the matter before the court? Or does the ruling, since the Supreme Court rules on constitutional questions, that covers everything in the United States? So if they rule in Louisiana that you can't draw lines predominantly on race, that doesn't give a pass to Mississippi, Tennessee, California to draw predominantly on race.
Not generally. Um, there can be situations, I can't think of any right off the top of my head, where a particular state may be using some nuance that the other state isn't, or relying on some specific wording in some specific law. So I don't want to say it always or never.
Mm-hmm.
But this one I think is pretty much a federal question, and it should apply across the board. Um, but you never say never.
Mm-hmm. So the Supreme Court, when they write their rulings out, are they very specific in intentional in the words that they use when they write these rulings out?
Yeah, typically they are.
So when they use the actual words, and was this in Calais, that district lines or apportionment can't be made based predominantly on race. It didn't say race couldn't be a factor. It said that it can't be drawn predominantly on race.
Well, the nuance there, and this is where I could have done a little more homework. Um, the court never actually says that you can't do it. It just says that race is not generally considered a compelling reason uh, for the strict scrutiny standard to apply. And in the past, I think it's been assumed by the court that in order to meet the requirements of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, that making up for some historical shortfall or shortcomings, race was okay to be used for that purpose, which I think the court now is pretty much saying that can't be enough. That race is not a basis that you can stand on in those situations.
And in a similar circumstance, uh, the court, and again, I think the court was wrong in their initial decision where they said college admissions to help recover for past problems or issues, that for a period of time that the admissions could be based on race.
Yeah.
And that is actually unconstitutional. Um, for anybody that says, well, the Supreme Court ruled on it, that means they're the final say on the Constitution. As an attorney and a legal scholar, are you a constitutional attorney, Chris, or do you know what those are?
I am a type of attorney that specifically defends the constitutional rights of my clients every day. I'm primarily now solely a criminal defense attorney.
Mm-hmm.
And, we defend the constitutional rights of our clients all the time. That's the main thing we do. But I don't know what a constitutional lawyer would be.
Yeah, that's an inside joke. I'm not going to name the guy here. I don't want to bring any undue attention to him. But yeah, I thought it was kind of funny as well. Um, yeah, so let's use a hypothetical. Now, I'm not usually a fan of hypotheticals, but if a district, let's say a year before Calais comes out, and a district was drawn predominantly on race. Race was the deciding factor of why this district was drawn. Post Calais, is that district constitutional?
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. You run into some trouble because you have to be able to prove that was predominantly the uh, reasoning behind the redistricting. Um, so that's always difficult in a lawsuit, is proving that was what they relied on. A similar circumstance comes up all the time in bats and challenges to jury makeup, where the defendant a lot of times tries to prove that the state or the prosecution struck all the jurors of a certain race um, without any other reason besides race.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a burden shift and all there. So that's a similar situation, because if the state can come up with a reason other than race that they relied on, it may stand scrutiny.
Mm-hmm. So if a court had told a state prior to Calais to redraw some district lines based predominantly on race, would that be enough to say that that district was drawn based on race if the court told them to do it?
That sounds like good evidence.
Yep.
Sounds like good evidence.
So, so it was based on a court ruling in December of 2022 when the Mississippi State Conference of the NAACP sued, alleging that new state legislative maps violated Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act by diluting black voting strength. They argued the maps should have included majority black districts in areas like DeSoto County and around Hattiesburg, given black population concentrations and racially polarized voting. A federal court later ruled that parts of those maps they were trying to draw were invalid, and they were ordered to be redrawn, leading to remedial maps in special elections in 2025. So a court actually told them the maps you're trying to draw don't take into account. That's why the NAACP sued. And the court said, you got to go fix this. And they used the word, again, they used specific words, remedial. So they were trying to fix a problem that the NAACP charged was going on in Mississippi.
Yeah. I believe similar thing happened in Alabama. Um, and I I spend most of my time working on uh, representing criminal defendants, so I don't have a lot of time to look into these cases for redistricting. But it seems like that similar circumstance is what happened over there in Alabama. So,
And was Alabama initially going to redraw their maps?
well, they've gone back and forth two or three times, I believe, redrawing maps, and the court struck them down and sent them back to the drawing board. So Alabama here in the last few weeks since Calais came out, the governor called a special session, and they uh, re well, they didn't redraw the map. They went back to the one that they drew previously.
Hmm. That's an interesting idea, since Mississippi was drawing a map that wasn't based on race. The NAACP sued, they won in court, and the court ordered them to redraw it to do away with that one they were going to use. Why not just go back to the one you were going to use before?
Yeah.
That's the question that I have for a lot of our state legislators, our lieutenant governor, our governor is, you got maps out there. There are plenty of them, and if if you're looking to draw it politically, which under the Constitution you can draw the map based on politics.
Yeah, you can absolutely do that.
So what I don't understand is, well, I kind of understand the reason behind why they're not redrawing the maps right now. So I threw a theory out there, and it's taken some traction. I'm Those of you that are familiar with Occam's razor, the most likely answer is usually the answer. So our lieutenant governor, who is no conservative, some would argue he's whether or not he's a Republican, is likely looking to run for governor because he has alienated people like me and other conservatives. It would be virtually impossible for him to secure the nomination as in Mississippi without Democrats voting in the Republican primary. They can cross over. In the general, though, if they voted in the Republican primary, they have to vote in the general, I believe, as a Republican. Excuse me, goodness. Um, so another aspect to that is that Tate Reeves will be leaving office in 2027 as our governor. He will have termed out, and my guess is he'd like to be appointed a U.S. senator. And Roger Wicker, one of our senators, is scheduled to his term would end in 2030. I've posited that Roger Wicker is not going to finish his term. He will likely retire before then, and whoever the governor is in after 2027, and if that was Delbert Hosemann, would owe a great debt of gratitude probably to Tate Reeves and appoint him as a senator. And Mississippi is an interesting state because we haven't directly elected a senator since I believe 1978 when Thad Cochran ran. All of our senators have been appointed and then ran after finishing out a retiring senator's terms. My guess is that'll happen here again. Goodness. So, um, Mississippi has a district, District 2. It covers almost half of the state, pretty much everything west of I-55, which runs straight and up and down the state. And Benny Thompson's in that district. So let's add some figures together. So we've got a district that was drawn based on predominantly on race. The Supreme Court has said you can't do that. Constitution has always said that you can't do that. We've got a person sitting in District 2, Benny Thompson, that chaired the January 6th committee and was a leading factor or a highly contributing factor to the impeachment of Donald Trump, who is our president right now. Can you think of any reason why Donald Trump would be averse to redistricting in Mississippi?
Nothing that makes sense, right?
We can come up with some reasons, but yeah, that wouldn't make sense.
Yeah, that sums it up, I'd say.
Yeah. And I think Donald Trump's on the record that the individuals that voted for that January 6th committee, that commission, not the committee makeup, but voted for the J6 commission, and we had 35 Republicans that voted for it, that they shouldn't be in office. Is there any reason why you think Donald Trump wouldn't have an issue with 35 Republicans that voted for the J6 commission?
Well, they're also not doing very well in primaries right now, and I don't know numbers off the top of my head, but I can
Talking about
think of
incumbents?
yeah, I'm thinking of a couple who have not done well in primaries in the last few weeks.
Or a little longer than that. Dan Crenshaw, gone.
Yeah,
Thomas Massey, on his way out. Yeah, this is going to be really interesting to see how this plays out. Now, getting to, I promised our listeners here, because we don't want to have a long podcast tonight, we're probably going to hurt some feelings. So for the past, I guess a couple of months now, I've been posting every day. Like today is May 24th, 2026, and Senator John Cornyn out of Texas has 2 days left in his political career. What would be your betting odds right now, given the Trump endorsement of Ken Paxton, that John Cornyn survives Tuesday?
that'd be interesting to see what the betting odds are. Poly Market, have you checked?
I have not. Let's check that while you talk a little bit about Mr. Cornyn's likelihood that he can survive this.
I wouldn't be very quick to bet on him. It does seem like Trump waited kind of late in this matchup to pick a horse, though, didn't he?
Well, here we go. Key market, Texas Republican Senate primary winner. In the shares, we have Ken Paxton 95 to 96%.
Yeah.
John Cornyn 4 to 5%. Think he's got a chance?
Well, you're telling me there's a chance.
I think some of the latest polls have Paxton in the mid to high 50s and Cornyn in the 30s.
Seems like Paxton got a pretty big bump.
Now, Texas has not elected a Democrat senator in 32 years. You think that James Tallarico has a chance of beating whoever the nominee is after Tuesday?
He makes my skin crawl.
As he does mine. So, yeah, what we have going on right now, though, and I'm watching now with another person that is on Fox News that I have no love for, and that's Trey Gowdy, who I thought was a waste of oxygen as a representative. He tried to talk like a Southern lawyer, but he really never got anything done. And I'm looking here, Cornyn was on Trey Gowdy's show, I guess probably this Sunday Night in America. He said, Paxton is a flawed candidate. he might not only lose the Senate seat, but he could also be the reason we lose congressional seats. Um, does it seem like fear mongering to try to get votes?
Maybe so. Maybe so. I'll tell you what I'm really interested in for a weird change of events is this L.A. mayor
Oh, with
race.
Spencer Pratt.
Yeah, Spencer Pratt's looking pretty impressive.
With California, I don't really until just the election's over with. I don't really put. I wouldn't bet on any of it. They always seem to figure out a way.
Well, they use that weird system where the top two go into the general,
Mm-hmm.
whether they're the same party or not, which I don't get why you would ever want that. Seems like you're taking away a choice. Um, but they've got some Democrats that they need to edge out of that race, or they're going to give Spencer Pratt one of those top two spots.
That can happen. The only thing worse than that, I think, is what they have in Alaska, and the only reason that Lisa Murkowski is a senator, and that's ranked choice voting.
Yeah.
And that was something that Mitch McConnell helped orchestrate that up in Alaska, and it is a problem. So, Senator,
Polymarket's got Bass and Pratt moving forward at 75%.
does it have one of them in the predominant lead?
Well, I don't see it laid out like that. It's got Bass versus Pratt, and she's at 84%. He's at 17%. So that's just the two of them. But when you look at a four uh, member choice, I don't see it laid out that way. The Ramen, I'm not really familiar with her. I think she's an actual socialist. Pratt beats her pretty seriously, 69-17. This is all Polymarket, so it's
Yeah,
just the betting odds. But follow the money, right?
that is true. Usually, people will, don't want to bet on a losing horse.
Yeah.
They might go in and cast a vote differently than they would say uh, to their friends and family because they're just there. But man, when you put your money in there, you're not betting to lose. I don't know anybody that has enough money, and I know some rich people that have enough money that I'm going to bet so heavily into the poly market to lose just so that I can sway the poly market. I can't see that.
No.
So, what is trending out here? Actually, if you look live on X, we've got a few people watching with the redistricting and politics on here. I see my friend Stealth Medical has her spaces going with about the terror attack. Highly recommend people, if you get a chance, to follow her and listen in. Um, so, another question that was up there, and I want to pose this constitutional question to you. Based on the 10th Amendment, can states just do whatever the heck they want to do?
That's a loaded question.
There are people that say, power not reserved for the federal government or reserved to the states. Um, I think, how would you explain that to a novice about the 10th Amendment and what the states can or cannot do? I mean, what a lot of people don't understand, they hear the state constitution and they think that when people swear an oath to come into office at the state and local level, that they're swearing an oath predominantly to the state constitution, and that's not the case. The U.S. Constitution is the ultimate authority. and no state constitution can usurp the federal constitution, the U.S. Constitution. So, how would you explain it to a novice about what states can and can't do in regards to anything?
Well, basically, and I haven't thought about it in a long time, but um, basically, if the Constitution doesn't speak about something at all, then the states have rights to legislate it. Otherwise, you can't usurp the authority that that is in the Constitution. So it would have to be an area that's void of any um, rules, basically, for a state to be able to have wide open rights. Um, I don't know. Does that answer your question?
I think so. The there are things that the U.S. Constitution specifically states what states can do and can't do. And I'm a big proponent of the Constitution, of what Scalia would say. The Constitution says what it says and nothing else. Otherwise, five hotshot attorneys would on the Supreme Court would run the world. Um, so, in regards, and I wrote this in an article about when they were trying to pull Trump off the ballot, the presidential ballot in Colorado, when the Secretary of State tried to do that. And I said it's 100% violation of the Constitution. The states don't have the authority to do that, to remove them on federal elections. There's already been numerous Supreme Court decisions on it, but states only have three responsibilities in regards to federal elections in the Constitution, and that's the time, manner, and place of elections. That's it. They can say we're going to run it from 7 in the morning until 7 in the evening for the time. The manner is we're going to do paper ballots. We're going to do in person, computer voting, scantrons, that, and the place. The polling places are here, here, and here. That's it. That's the only things they can do. They can't come in and say you can or cannot be on the ballot. That was already tried a number of times, and that was why I predicted in that article I wrote that it would be a 9-0 decision. That even the learned, astute Ketanji Brown Jackson would have to agree that that's what the Constitution says. Let's think of some other Constitution questions that are out here. So, um, I've used this before, but I'd like to hear how you, and you've heard me talk about it. There's three branches of government. Which do you think is the most powerful?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with you. Um,
According to the Constitution, if you just look at the powers that each of the branches have, do we have three co-equal branches?
um, in some ways, they're co-equal, but if you boil it down to who can have the final word, I think the legislative branch can always have the final word, because they can override a presidential veto, and they can uh, amend the Constitution. And those two things give them sort of an extra power over the other two branches.
Yep. Which do you think would be the weakest of the three branches?
Probably the judicial, because really all they're doing is clarifying uh, what the legislative branch did. Defining. There's always going to be uh, problems with clarity. You write a law and you try to think of every possible situation that could come out of it, and there's always unintended consequences, and unforeseen circumstances. And that's really what the judicial branch is doing, is making rulings on those things. And obviously, they're also settling disputes between states,
Mm-hmm.
things like that.
Um, has the Supreme Court gotten things wrong?
Sure, sure.
So they're not the final say on the Constitution, and they're not always right.
Well, um, when you say they've gotten things wrong, it's kind of like proving that someone has committed perjury. It's hard to prove unless you've got someone that makes two incongruent statements under oath.
Mm-hmm.
So if the Supreme Court is found this way in one case and the other way in a totally different case, well, one of them has to be wrong.
Yeah.
And, that's definitely happened.
So do you think, and I'll give you my opinion on it, do you think that the Supreme Court often weighs more heavily than it should on stare decisis?
Well, I'm conflicted on that because you have to be able to get what you expect, and you have to have some sort of a working understanding of what's going to happen
Mm-hmm.
if you do one thing or another. So it's not bad to be consistent, and I think that's what stare decisis is about, is consistency. um
See, I get the feeling that sometimes justices rely too heavily on that so that they don't have to answer a difficult question or make a correction, because I don't think I've ever heard the Supreme Court say, we got it wrong back then.
right, right.
They just say, they usually, it's something about circumstances have changed, or in the Dred Scott case, it actually took the legislature stepping in and
Yeah,
fixing
which
all of
is their
that.
job.
Yeah, I mean, but at some point you have to say I was wrong and I made a mistake, and I think that would lend more to their credibility. I think they got a lot of things wrong. I think they got Roe v. Wade wrong.
Yeah, well,
Back,
I think Justice Ginsburg thought that Roe v. Wade was wrong. I mean, the other thing is, what about Judge Roberts, um, talking about Obamacare?
oh, it's a tax when it's not.
Yeah,
It's a tax until it's not a tax.
yeah. I mean, it says it's not a tax, but you think it is a tax, so all of a sudden it's a tax.
Yeah, the I think that Supreme Court justices would be better served to follow the path of Scalia, and I think that's why he was the greatest legal mind that I've ever followed, studied, read about, been a fan of, because he just looked at the Constitution first, which is the ultimate jurisdiction of the court. Without the Constitution, they have no jurisdiction. So if he would look at the Constitution, he would say, what does the Constitution say about it? And if the Constitution doesn't say anything about it, then there's nothing really there's nothing really to argue before the court. There has to be some type of constitutional impact or question or something for them to look at it. Now, you talked about settling disputes. I would argue that any of the disputes they settle are have a foundation in the Constitution. There's a constitutional question in everything that they do. So I think if you just look at the Constitution, and it's not hard to read and it's not hard to understand, it's when people start interpreting it differently over time. And I think that was what was Scalia was a master at. I don't need to interpret it. I read it. It either says what it says or it doesn't. So with him, it's just it either is or it is not, which made it much easier for him, I think, to articulate his rulings based on the Constitution, where you had people like Ruth Bader Ginsburg at some points looking outside the Constitution into foreign law for guidance.
Well, I think there's always going to be interpretation because um, things are just not as clear as you'd like them to be all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Second Amendment, which, I mean, you and I both are big proponents of the Second Amendment and the rights that are given to citizens therein, but, you know, can you as a citizen go out and get a nuclear weapon? I mean, where does it end?
Well, my argument on that, and I've used this before, and I haven't had anybody be able to counter it effectively, is the Second Amendment was written in such a way for the citizens to be able to protect themselves against an oppressive government. And for that to happen, the government can't be in a position of whether it of firepower superiority over the citizens. So my argument would be, yes, they can. There is no limit to that. It's any weapon that the federal government or any way that the weapon is built that the federal government is allowed to have, a citizen should be allowed to have. And I saw that firsthand in the FBI because when I came into the FBI, uh, if I wanted to get back then it was an MP5 machine gun. It was a fully automatic machine gun, and not just any citizen can just go pick up a fully automatic MP5. There was a lot of hoops and hurdles to go through. With me, I just had to qualify with it, and that changed during the time that I was in the FBI. It went away from the fully automatic. I think they still had the 2 round burst on these weapons. I don't remember when I last shot with, I think it was with the M4, if that went 2 round burst or if it was just fire or safe, were the only options that were there. But I'm a big proponent of that. The federal government can't be in a position where it could has the capability to oppress the citizens. Um, yeah, we can do a Second Amendment when on another podcast. I'm just a I've always been a big proponent of the Constitution. It has developed over time. I got more adamant about it when I was running the civil rights program for the FBI here in Mississippi in the early 2000s because I could see how it was put into effect. And that's where I came up with a phrase. And I don't know. I don't know if this phrase ever offended you. I don't think we've ever talked about it, but I have used it before with, there was a guy I was interviewing. He was up for a U.S. attorney position. And typically, the way that those work, if you're up for those, the FBI does the candidate interview. And they typically assign a senior experienced agent to do it. And I'd been in about, I don't know, 16, 17 years at the time and had been pretty well known for my acumen in interviewing. And I had interviewed this guy. And I just said, well, you're an attorney, you practice the law. I'm a federal agent, I apply the law. So you practice law, I just do it professionally. And he kind of laughed about it. But the way that I look at it is, it's like questioning in court. It is different conducting an interrogation in a criminal investigation than conducting direct, redirect, cross, and recross examination in a courtroom. Uh, is it true that a good attorney never asks a question he doesn't already know the answer to?
Now, there's times when you always have to ask questions you don't know the answer to. In fact, sometimes you think you know what you're going to get and you get the opposite.
Even when it's your client on the stand?
Absolutely. I never put my client on the stand. Um, but the practice versus professional thing, my answer to that would be I protect people from constitutional attacks by professionals because government agents are the ones who uh, break constitutional rules all the time.
All the time?
Well, all the time being a term loosely applied. They're the only ones who do. The defendants are not going to break the Constitution.
Well, the government's the only one that can violate the Constitution.
Exactly. And
Probably a
agents.
better way of saying it there than than all the time is saying the only ones that have the ability to violate the Constitution is the government.
Right. And there's no uh, guardrails except for people like me.
Mm. So, getting to as we're starting to wrap up here, um, have you ever heard me in speaking with someone on a political matter get angry, yell, scream, use pejoratives? Even with my brother, Kevin.
Have that rephrase that. What was the question?
So when I get into a political debate with someone, have you heard me, really elevate my voice, be forceful, yell, scream, call people names, stay away from facts, and just deal with name calling? You know me now for how many years?
Probably going on 30.
Yeah.
Probably going on 30.
Would you say it's my MO that I just kind of
That's not
talk?
your style.
Yeah.
No.
I think
It's not your style.
and I think I pick a lot of that up with you and they can hear us having this conversation now, is we just kind of talk things through. And I think on the majority of the things we do agree.
Yeah, for the most part, I think there's little nuances that we disagree on. Um, I'm not going to bring it up because I don't want to start an hour-long conversation.
Hold
But
on.
I can think of some nuances that we disagree on. Even in silence, I'm not going to bring it up.
I'm sorry. I've got one of the people that I'm connected with. I just said, "Hey, we're going live." I sent her a message saying we were going live on this impromptu podcast. She goes, "Where are you? This is more important to be on our spaces." I mean, you can see it. It's on the computer here. He's actually sitting to the right of me. It looks like he's sitting. Yeah, there he is, right there. Yeah, he doesn't just have the same decorations in the back of his office. Um, so give me some feedback on the way that I handle myself with um, elected representatives, where I don't do gotcha questions. I don't consider them gotcha questions. I just ask questions based on a particular topic. And I try to do it based on things that I've heard them speak about. Some of the representatives that I've spoken with have just come off of a stage talking about a particular topic, and I ask them some questions. Um, would you say that probably the majority of the people, if I question them on what their First Amendment rights were, what percentage, rough guess, and I'm not gonna hold you to it, do you think would say petition and seek redress of grievances first out of their mouth?
5.
5%. That's pretty. I think it's actually high. for 5%, because I've had some elected representatives that, look surprised when I bring that up. um, Probably because they're not used to having somebody ask them questions.
Yeah, I would, and given feedback, I would say this. You and your sister and your brother are all very good scholars of people, and you all come up with good questions that people haven't considered, but they should have.
I like that. That's high praise, sir. I I think that, when I talk to you, and you help, uh, you're probably one of the first people that I call when I have something I'm thinking about in regards to the law and the Constitution. Um, and even I've agreed with you now over the years, with the one thing that you told me repeatedly when I was an FBI agent: never talk to the cops.
Yeah.
Ever. Never, 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 never. Nothing ever good comes from that. And I've done my best to try to convince you that, hey, when I talk to people, and it is not hyperbole. I'm telling you right now, in 25 years as a federal agent, I had 3 people that I recall invoke their rights. Everybody else talked to me.
Yeah. That's my experience too.
So I tell people, this is your opportunity to tell me your side of the story. And you may not ever get another opportunity to tell me your side of the story. Because when you talk to your attorney, and he should tell you this, is to not talk to me. That if you have to talk, you wait and let the government talk first, so they can tell you everything that they know. Um, and the government's obligated to tell you everything that they know if they're going to use it in your prosecution.
Well, my advice is typically you want to tell your side of the story one time in front of a jury of your peers and let them make the decision about who's telling the truth or not from that.
Mm-hmm.
Because even if you're 100% not guilty of whatever you're being accused of, if you're caught in even a tiny little discrepancy or lie in your statement to the police, it's going to make you look guilty regardless. So you want to avoid telling your story more than one time. And that's true almost across the board. In fact, you want to wait until the government has put on their entire case
Mm-hmm.
to determine whether you even need to tell your side of the story, because the government has the burden of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have to prove you're not guilty. So telling your side of the story, is a one-time thing at the very end if necessary. That's
So
what
you're
I
not a big
do.
fan of what some of these politicians say. Well, if he hasn't done anything wrong, he has nothing to hide. He should just come in and talk to us.
Yeah, if the prosecutor said that at any point during a trial, that would cause an automatic mistrial, and they'd have to start all over. That's how important that is.
I agree. I agree. On that note, we're going to leave it where we agree. We're going to find something here that he and I are adamantly on opposite sides of, other than, and I think it's more of a personal definition of whether or not your rights are absolute. Um, I think we'll figure out a way to get through that. Chris says they're not absolute. I say they're absolute, but I may be defining it different than he does. where, someone says, well, you just can't do anything you want to with a gun. That's correct. But the government can't tell you can't own one unless there's certain things that have to happen. You can't take the gun and go out and kill somebody with it because you're being prosecuted for the act of murder. You're not being prosecuted for the act of having the gun. But I'm also, and this is where my time is running the civil rights program, and I got convinced of this because I didn't really think this way before I ran that program, that I think that once you've paid your debt to society and you are exiting prison, you should be able to get your Second Amendment rights back, get your gun, you should be able to vote. I believe all of that, that once you're out. And if the government says, we can't have that person have a gun, they're too dangerous, then why aren't you letting them out?
Yeah, there's an offense that people get charged with every day called felon in possession.
Yep.
And that exists and it gets enforced. And that is my argument that your rights are not absolute.
No, we'll agree to disagree on that. We'll get that definition cleared up. All right, that's the end of this podcast. I'm going to check in with a friend of mine who just hit me something here in the chat. I just showed it to Chris here on the computer screen in front of me. Sorry for my voice if it sounds a little bit different. I'm going to try. I keep saying this, and I'm going to get back to doing this more often. That actually may happen soon. I'm trying to decide now if I'm going to fully retire, go ahead and take my Social Security, cut back on some of the work. Every time I do that, I get one of my law firm clients call up and they say, hey, can I pay you a whole bunch of money to go do something that the government didn't pay you near enough to do after they trained you? And I'm not going to go into specifics on that. I keep my personal business separate from the podcast stuff. It's not hard to find out what I do in my personal business. But anyway, that is the end of this podcast. If you have some ideas, some questions you've got, throw them on here. Chris is just a quick link away from bringing him into the podcast. We can have another one of these where we can talk about some of these legal questions. We may look at running a spaces. I've had some ideas about running a spaces where several of us honorably retired agents come into a space and allow the public just to ask us questions, and especially about things that are going on right now. If you live in Texas, get out and vote. I've made it clear I don't trust John Cornyn. He has proven not to be a defender of the Constitution. I didn't care too much for him pushing and making it easier for states to enact red flag laws. Chris, are red flag laws unconstitutional?
I don't like anything about them.
Yep. Do red flag laws generally usurp due process?
No, I don't think they usurp due process. It's like any other injunction. You've got a right to a hearing within a certain period of time.
Oh, no. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the actions that the government takes, such as if you have an allegation where you haven't had your due process rights fulfilled, and they decide they're going to come take things away from you while they figure out your due process.
Your due process comes in the form of having the right to a hearing within a certain period of time.
Before the government can infringe upon your liberties.
No. It's just
I mean, they can't come take your guns away because somebody made an allegation against you.
Well, how about this? Somebody charges you with the crime. Do they arrest you before or after you're found guilty?
Oh no, they arrest you before.
Right.
Yeah, they do take they do take you into custody and process you.
Same deal.
But then you have to have within a certain period of time an initial appearance. You have to have a preliminary hearing to determine whether or not you're
same goes.
Yeah.
Same situation.
I'm talking about, can they lock you up based on that allegation? Yes. Can they take the extra measures of going to your home and removing things from your home that are not evidentiary and not tools of the crime or anything like that? Like if they say, well, your psychologically imbalanced, we can't let you have guns.
It's the same situation though. You're accused of something.
Mm-hmm.
The government takes certain steps, and then you get a hearing. That's what due process is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know,
Yeah, but who is making the decision on that? On the red flag laws, it is if a doctor has made the decision that you're imbalanced and you haven't had a hearing or anything on that, that the police take action based on what the doctor said and arrest you and put you into jail.
yeah, but then you get your hearing
Yeah,
in
after
a
the
certain
fact. What
period
I'm
of
saying
time.
is the
It's the
initial.
same as an arrest.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, what I'm talking about is they're basing it off what the doctor said. They don't go get the arrest warrant at the local level. They can just go arrest you.
They don't get an arrest warrant most of the time.
Oh no. Well, I
Most
mean,
of the time they
on the
arrest you without a warrant.
well, we have some plain view arrest and things we were doing as federal agents, but every arrest warrant I ever executed in my entire 25 years that was in, we went before a magistrate or a base commander when I was an OSI agent before we went and took somebody into custody.
Yeah, well, I don't I don't see that procedure very often.
Okay. All right. We're going to call it quits before we get into a whole nother rabbit hole of discussion here. Thanks for tuning in right now. I am going to take a break for a minute. I'm going to pop in and listen in on a Spaces that's out there. Someone is adamant that I be there. I want to thank the 75 plus people, I guess, that were tuning in live and listening here. I'm going to try to start posting some other things every now and then. I do some media hits and stuff here. My brother-in-law has been kind of my proxy producer here, so he handles a lot of the accounts and stuff that's out there. I'm going to try to figure out a way to start posting some of that stuff to the Facebook Blunt Force Conservative account so you can see some of the commentary that I give on like Newsmax, News Nation, Bill O'Reilly, Kimberly Guilfoyle's show, places I've been before, or when I make some appearances on the radio. Thanks again for tuning in. Say goodnight, Chris.
Good night, Chris.
All right. We will see you
Didn't
next.
work when we're both named Chris.
I know. And then got my good friend Chris Salcedo out there as well.